The night was quiet, but not in a safe way. The wind moved across the empty fields, carrying a sound that was not wind at all. It was like whispers, thin and sharp, rising and falling as if many voices spoke together. The farmers of the small town of Grayhill had heard it before. But this night it was louder. Dogs barked, then fell silent, as if something warned them to stay quiet. In the barn of old Mr. Carter, a cow cried out once. Then nothing, only silence. When he checked in the morning, the cow was gone. Only broken wood and strange marks on the floor remained. Children began to tell strange stories. Little Anna claimed she saw glowing eyes outside her window at night. She said the eyes were watching her, bright like fireflies but too large. Too close, her older brother laughed. But the next night he saw them too, shapes moving in the corn. Tall shadows that did not belong to man or animal. At first people thought it was wolves. But wolves did not walk on two legs. Wolves did not knock gently on doors. Yet one evening that was exactly what happened. The town was gathered in the house of Sheriff Dean. They had locked the doors, because the whispers outside had grown so strong that even the bravest men felt their hearts tighten. Suddenly there was a sound not of breaking but of knocking. Slow and patient 3 times like a visitor asking to be welcomed. The townspeople looked at each other in fear. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Until the sheriff himself stepped forward. With a shotgun in his hands, he opened the door just a little, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Tall figures stood in the darkness. Their skin was pale like stone, their eyes wide and glowing. They did not push their way in. They only bowed their heads. One of them spoke. But the voice was not human, it was heavy, layered, as if 10 voices spoke the same word together. "Feed our children, human," the voice said, "and we will give you a gift. But only when night falls." Gasps filled the room, children pressed close to their mothers. Men lifted their guns higher, but the strangers did not move closer. They only waited, still and patient, their eyes never blinking. One of the women whispered, "What children? What gift?" But no answer came, only silence until the whispering wind outside returned. When the sheriff closed the door, the figures were gone, as if they had melted into the night. The people of Grayhill argued until morning. Some said they were demons, others said angels. Old Mr. Carter said they were liars, tricking them to steal more cows. But young Anna whispered that maybe they only wanted help. Nobody believed her, yet nobody could forget the glowing eyes. The next night the town gathered again. They lit lanterns, sharpened tools, and prayed. And when the wind began to carry the whispers once more, the people waited. This time the figures returned, not alone. Behind them came smaller shapes, thin and fragile, moving slowly. They were children, but not human children. Their bodies bent in strange ways, their arms too long, their skin pale like moonlight. Their eyes glowed faintly, not bright like their parents, but tired, weak, hungry. The tall figures stepped forward again. They raised their arms toward the small ones as if to show they were harmless. Then the voice came again, shaking the air. "Feed our children, human, and we will give you a gift." When the night falls, the town was frozen. Mothers clutched their children close. Men whispered to each other. Should they give food to these strange creatures? What if the food made them stronger? What if the gift was a trap, a curse that would destroy them all? And yet the smaller ones swayed, weak and trembling, their glowing eyes dim like dying fire. Finally, young Anna stepped forward. Her mother cried out, but Anna held a piece of bread in her hand. She walked to the door, opened it a little, and placed the bread on the ground. One of the alien children moved closer. Slow, careful. It picked up the bread, sniffed it, then ate. For a moment nothing happened. Then its eyes glowed brighter, a soft light, almost warm. The tall figure bowed its head deeply, as if giving thanks. The voice returned, softer this time. "Tomorrow night." The gift. The door closed again and fear spread like fire. Some people shouted that Anna had doomed them all. Others whispered that maybe she had saved them. The sheriff sat silent, shotgun across his knees, staring at the door, because he knew one thing: tomorrow night, when the sun fell and the whispers returned, the strangers would come again. And this time, they would not only ask, they would give. But nobody in Grayhill could decide if that was a blessing, or the beginning of something far darker. The sun rose over Grayhill, but no one felt safe. The promise from the strangers hung heavy in the air. "Tomorrow night, the gift," the voice had said, and those words replayed in every mind. Some believed it was hope, others believed it was death. That day the people gathered in the town square. They spoke in angry voices, hands shaking, hearts full of fear. Some said they should leave Greyhill, pack their bags and run. Others argued it was too late. The strangers knew where they lived. They could not escape. The sheriff tried to calm them, but even his voice carried doubt. He kept looking toward the forest, as if the glowing eyes were watching even in daylight. By evening, the choice was made. They would test the strangers again. They filled baskets with bread, fruit, and cooked meat. The food smelled warm and human, but everyone wondered if it would poison the creatures, or worse, make them stronger. Still, fear was mixed with curiosity, because no one wanted to miss the promise of a gift from beings who walked the night. As darkness came, the whispers returned, soft at first, then louder, as if hundreds of unseen mouths spoke from the trees. Children covered their ears, women held lamps close. Men tightened their grip on axes and rifles, and then, just like the night before, the tall figures appeared. They walked with no sound, their pale skin glowing faintly in the lantern light. Behind them came the smaller ones, their children thin and strange, their steps unsteady, their glowing eyes dimmed and flickered. Like fading stars, the sheriff took a deep breath. He stepped forward and placed the basket on the ground. His hands trembled, but he stood tall. The largest of the tall figures bent down, bowing its head. Then the children moved. Slow and quiet, they reached for the bread, the fruit, the meat. They ate in silence, their long hands clutching the food with both desperation and care. No chewing sound, no normal noise of eating, only the faint crackle of the lantern flame. It was not human, but it was not violent either. The townspeople watched with wide eyes. One of the men whispered, "We feed them, and they grow stronger. Then they'll crush us." Another woman said softly, "No, look, they are weak, starving. Maybe they only want to live." But no one could agree. Fear twisted every thought. The only clear thing was the rule of the night: feed their children and wait for the gift. When the last piece of bread was eaten, silence fell. The small ones turned their glowing eyes toward their parents, and the tall figures raised their hands. The deep, layered voice returned, shaking the walls of every house. "Tomorrow night, the gift," it said again. The words were the same, but heavier now, like a warning. Then in a blink, the strangers melted into the darkness. The whispers faded, leaving only the empty night. The people of Greyhill could not sleep. Every creak of wood, every brush of wind made them jump. They argued again until morning. Some wanted to burn the forest, drive the creatures away before the gift came. Others whispered about the crystal from old stories, treasures from the sky, power beyond man's reach. One thing was certain: no one wanted to be the first to touch the gift when it arrived. On the second night, the whispers returned faster. The townsfolk had prepared even more food. This time, whole animals were butchered. Laid out on the ground, the alien children came forward, their pale arms trembling. They devoured the feast in silence, their glowing eyes brighter than before. The tall figures bowed lower, their long shadows stretching across the houses. The voice came once more: "Tomorrow night." The gift, but this time, something else followed. A sound, low and deep, like a growl hidden behind the words. It made the lamps flicker. It made the ground tremble. The townsfolk looked at one another in terror. Had they fed hunger, or had they fed something far darker? That night, Anna lay awake by her window. She stared at the forest, waiting for the glow of eyes. And she saw something new. Not 2 eyes, not 4, but dozens watching, waiting, like stars that had fallen to the ground. She shivered because she understood the truth. The gift was coming, but it was not meant for all. It was meant for the brave or the foolish who dared to claim it. The town did not yet know what Anna had seen. They believed they were preparing for a single moment. A single gift, but the forest was full of eyes, more than anyone guessed. And when night fell again, the people of Greyhill would discover that feeding the unknown had only opened the door wider. A door that once open could never again be closed. The third night came, heavier than the others. The people of Greyhill gathered in silence, every face pale with fear and curiosity. They had fed the strangers twice, and twice the promise had been spoken: tomorrow night, the gift. Now tomorrow had arrived, and no one knew if they should pray for sunrise or beg for night never to fall. The sheriff walked the street with a lantern in his hand. The yellow light touched the walls of houses where families waited in silence. No songs, no laughter, only whispers and the scrape of knives being sharpened. Children peered through cracks in curtains, searching for the glow in the fields. Every heart beat faster as the sun slipped behind the trees. The forest turned black, and then the whispers began again. This night the whispers were not soft, they were strong, pulsing. Like voices carried by thunder, every window rattled. Every candle flame bent sideways. The people covered their ears, but the voices entered their minds. The tall figures stepped out of the shadows once more, their pale bodies glowing. Behind them walked their children, stronger now, their eyes brighter than before. They moved with purpose, no longer weak, no longer trembling. The baskets of food were placed on the ground again. The alien children ate in silence, though now their movements were quicker, hungrier. It felt less like feeding the helpless and more like feeding soldiers. Men exchanged nervous glances, and women pulled their children closer. When the last scrap of food was gone, the tallest figure stepped forward. It raised its long arms, and the deep, layered voice filled the air. Tonight, the gift, the earth shook, faint but real. From the dark forest behind the figures came a light, soft at first, then brighter. It was not fire, not lantern, not any human thing. The glow spread like liquid, pouring across the ground toward the town square. The people gasped, stepping back as something round and smooth rolled forward. It was a crystal large as a man's chest. Glowing with a strange blue light, it stopped in the very center of the square. Humming softly, no one dared move. The strangers stood in silence, their glowing eyes fixed on the humans. The sheriff's hand trembled on his shotgun, his mouth dry at last. One brave man named Thomas stepped forward. He reached out, his hand hovering above the crystal. The glow pulsed like a heartbeat. Then Thomas touched it. A blinding flash filled the square. People cried out, shielding their eyes. When the light faded, Thomas was still standing. But his face was pale, his eyes wide. He spoke in a broken voice. I saw everything." The crowd pressed closer. Desperate for answers, Thomas trembled, tears running down his face. "Other worlds," he whispered. "Cities of light. Machines that fly without wings. Towers taller than mountains." His voice dropped. "But I also saw our world, our earth, burning, broken, filled with ash." Gasps filled the air. Some shouted at the strangers, demanding answers. Others fell to their knees, thinking they had seen a prophecy. The tall figure raised its arm again. The voice returned heavy as stone. "Knowledge is the gift, human. We show you the path of light, but also the shadow of your end." The crystal pulsed again, glowing brighter. More people touched it, one after another. Each time the visions came, worlds of wonder, but also the same ending. Earth in ruin, cities falling, skies black with fire. The people grew restless, torn between awe and fear. Some called the gift a miracle. Others cursed it as a curse. The whispers around the square grew louder. Not from the forest this time, but from the people themselves. Anna, the small girl who had first fed them, stepped forward quietly. She touched the crystal with her tiny hand. Her eyes widened, and for a long moment she stood frozen. Then she smiled faintly, a strange calm on her face. She turned to the sheriff and whispered, "It's not just a warning. It's a choice." No one understood her words, but they felt heavy, important. The strangers did not explain. They only stood, watching. Waiting. At last, the crystal dimmed. Its glow softened until it looked no brighter than moonlight. The tall figure lowered its arms and spoke again. "Feed our children, human, and more gifts will come. Each gift brings power. Each gift brings price." Then the strangers turned and melted back into the forest. The whispers faded with them, leaving only silence and fear. The people of Grey Hill stood around the crystal. No one touched it now, though its soft light called to them. The sheriff looked at the crowd, his face hard. "We cannot decide tonight," he said. "Lock your doors, keep your children close. Tomorrow, we will choose." But as he spoke, Anna kept staring at the crystal. Her small hand reaching for it again, she whispered to herself. Words no one else could hear. "They showed us the fire, but maybe they showed us how to stop it too." And in the quiet of the square, the crystal pulsed once more. Like a heartbeat, waiting, patient, alive. The crystal sat in the town square all day, glowing softly, humming like a living heart. No one touched it after the visions of the night before. Children stared from windows, too frightened to go near. Men walked around it with rifles ready, as if it might suddenly rise and attack, and women whispered prayers, crossing themselves again and again. The gift had been given, but no one felt safe by morning. Grey Hill was no longer a quiet town. Strangers had come, soldiers, government men, Scientists with notebooks and cameras. Someone had sent word, and now trucks filled the streets. Heavy boots shook the ground. The soldiers built fences around the crystal, pointing their guns at it like it was an enemy. The scientists touched it with wires, tapped it with metal rods, but the crystal did not respond. It only pulsed, steady and calm, as if waiting for night to fall again. The townsfolk grew restless. Half of them wanted the crystal gone, fearing it would bring doom. The other half whispered about its power. If it showed machines that could fly across stars, if it showed towers beyond mountains, maybe it could give them those things. Maybe Gray Hill would not just be a poor farming town. Maybe it would become the center of the world. Fear and curiosity burned side by side, and neither could be put out. The sheriff tried to keep order, but even he was torn. He remembered the fire in Thomas's eyes when he spoke of earth burning. He remembered Anna's strange calm when she said it was a choice. But now the crystal stood silent, giving no answers, only questions. He looked at the soldiers and wondered, if they took it away, would the strangers return? Or would they bring something worse? That night the whispers began again. The soldiers shouted orders, guns raised, lights flashing into the trees. But the light only showed empty branches. No figures, no glowing eyes, until at last, the tall shapes stepped out of the dark, their pale skin shining. Behind them came their children. No longer weak, no longer stumbling. They moved with purpose now, their glowing eyes bright and steady. The townsfolk gasped, but the soldiers shouted. "Stay back," one cried. "Don't come closer." The strangers ignored them, their gaze fixed on the children of Gray Hill. And then the voice came again, heavy, layered, filling the air like thunder. "Feed our children, human," it said, "and we will bring more gifts." The sheriff stood frozen, watching the soldiers raise their rifles. One scientist screamed, "Don't shoot! This is history." But another shouted, "They are using you. They are growing stronger." Fear clashed with curiosity, louder than the whispers in the trees. The alien children stepped closer to the baskets of food placed on the ground, their long fingers reaching, their eyes glowing brighter with hunger. The soldiers blocked the way, rifles aimed for a moment. It seemed blood would fall on Gray Hill's dirt. Then little Anna ran forward, slipping past the men. She carried bread in her hands, warm and fresh. Her mother screamed, but Anna knelt in front of the alien children. She placed the bread down gently, her eyes never leaving theirs. One of the pale children bent low, took the bread, and ate. The glow in its eyes grew brighter, warmer, almost human. The tall figure bowed its head deeply. The voice came again, softer now. "Human child shows the path. Human child feeds without fear." The soldiers lowered their guns. Confused, uncertain, the scientists scribbled notes furiously, desperate to capture every word, but the townsfolk stood silent. Hearts divided, were they witnessing peace or building their own end? The sheriff stepped forward at last, his voice steady but low. "What is the price?" He asked. "What do these gifts cost us?" The figure lifted its head, its many-layered voice echoing. "Every gift has weight, human. Knowledge brings power, but power brings enemies. Feed our children, and we will prepare you for the war that comes." The crowd gasped, fear rippling like fire. War. The word cut deep. Was this a warning or a trap? The soldiers shouted again, demanding answers, but the strangers only stood still, their glowing eyes cold. Then, without warning, the crystal in the square flared bright. Visions filled the night, the sky torn open by fire, black ships descending, cities falling, humans screaming, but also visions of great machines, towers of light, weapons that cut through darkness. Two paths, both terrifying, both real. When the vision ended, the people were left trembling. Some cried, some prayed, some shouted for the strangers to leave. Others whispered that this was humanity's chance, that Gray Hill had been chosen. Fear and curiosity burned hotter than ever, and no one knew which side would win. The strangers turned, leading their children back into the forest. The voice faded with them. "Tomorrow night." The gift? The words hung heavy in the air. And Gray Hill knew the fight was no longer just against fear. It was against itself. Gray Hill woke to the sound of arguments. The visions of war still burned in their minds. The crystal in the square pulsed like a sleeping heart, waiting patient alive, but the people were no longer united. Half believed the strangers were saviors. Half believed they were monsters, and in that fire of fear and hope, something terrible was about to happen. The soldiers wanted control. They built bigger fences around the crystal, posted guards with rifles, and told the townsfolk to stay back. "This is government property now," one officer barked. But the people of Gray Hill refused. "It came to us first," shouted old Mr. Carter. "It belongs to this town, not to you." Voices rose, fists shook, and still the crystal pulsed as if amused by human anger. That afternoon, panic spread. A child was missing. Little Ben, only 7 years old, had vanished from his bed. His mother screamed. Tearing through the streets, the sheriff gathered men, searching the houses, the barns, the fields. Tracks were found in the dirt, long, thin prints, not human. They glowed faintly in the dust. Leading toward the forest, the people gathered at the edge of the trees. Soldiers raised their rifles, farmers carried axes, mothers cried out for their sons. The sheriff stepped forward, lantern in hand. The whispers started, low and soft, curling through the branches. And then he saw them, glowing eyes deeper in the woods, watching, waiting. The pale children moved between the trees, and in their midst was Ben, the missing boy, laughing, chasing the strange children as if they were friends. The crowd gasped. His mother screamed his name, but Ben only waved. One of the alien children handed him a piece of glowing fruit. Pale and shimmering, Ben bit into it, his small teeth shining in the strange light. He laughed again, brighter than before, his skin glowing faintly. The sheriff's hand shook as he raised his lantern. The truth burned into his eyes. These creatures were not stealing children. They were inviting them, feeding them, sharing something unseen. The tall figure stepped from the shadows. The largest bowed its head, its glowing eyes fixed on the humans. The voice came again, heavy and layered. "Your child is safe. Human? He walks with ours, he eats with ours. We do not take. We share." But the soldiers shouted, "Release him now," their rifles aimed, their voices sharp with fear. The alien children pulled Ben closer, protective, their glowing eyes flaring. The boy looked confused, as if torn between two families. And in that moment, the truth was clear. Their young could not survive alone. They needed food, care, warmth, the same as human children, and they offered gifts in exchange, gifts too dangerous to ignore. The sheriff lowered his hand slowly, his voice cracked as he asked, "Why us? Why Gray Hill? Out of the whole world, why here?" The figure's voice rolled like thunder through the trees. "Because you fed first, because your child was not afraid, because we are dying, and only human food can save us." The words fell heavy. The people stared, the soldiers cursed, the mothers wept. So this was the hidden truth, not invasion, not conquest, but desperation. The strangers were not conquerors, they were refugees, and yet, every gift they gave carried a price that grew heavier each night. Ben was returned at last, walking slowly from the forest. His mother wrapped him in her arms, tears running down her face, but as she held him, she gasped. His skin glowed faintly under the lantern light, and his eyes, his human eyes, carried a faint shimmer like the glow of the alien children. The crowd stepped back in fear. Was he still human, or had he begun to change? That night, the crystal flared brighter than ever before. Visions poured into the minds of everyone nearby. The aliens' homeworld broken and burning. Oceans turned black, skies filled with storms. The pale children starving in caves, waiting for help that never came, and then Earth. Still whole, still alive, but fragile. The vision whispered without words. One world must save the other, or both would fall. When the light faded, the sheriff fell to his knees. He understood the choice now. If they fed the children, more gifts would come. Power, knowledge, weapons, miracles. But each gift tied Gray Hill closer to the strangers. And maybe one day Gray Hill would no longer be human at all. The townsfolk whispered in fear. Some swore they would never feed the strangers again. Others argued it was destiny, that humanity was meant to walk with these beings. But the crystal pulsed again, and the words returned. Tomorrow night? The gift? The sheriff looked at Anna, who stood silent by her mother's side. Her young face calm, her eyes steady, she whispered, almost too soft to hear. They are not stealing us. They are choosing us, and though no one wanted to believe her, in their hearts, they knew the truth. The hidden truth was not that the aliens needed them. It was that soon humans might need the aliens even more. Gray Hill could not sleep. The boy Ben lay in his mother's arms, his skin faintly glowing, his breath steady but strange. Some whispered he was blessed, others whispered he was cursed. The crystal in the square pulsed brighter than ever, casting blue light through every window. It was not a gift anymore, it was a reminder. A reminder that the town had stepped into something far beyond their control. By morning, soldiers argued with scientists. The scientists begged to study Ben, to test his blood, to measure the glow in his skin. The soldiers warned that he was dangerous, that the boy was no longer fully human. The people of Grey Hill shouted at them both. "He is our child," they cried. "He belongs to us, not to you." But the boy only smiled faintly, his eyes shining with that strange shimmer. He seemed peaceful, but peace often hides storms. That night the strangers returned, their pale children moved with strength now. No longer weak, no longer trembling. Their eyes glowed steady, their steps sure. The townsfolk gasped. Each feeding made them stronger. More alive, more like humans in spirit, but the question burned. What did it make the humans? The tall figure raised its arms, and the layered voice rolled across the town. "Feed our children, human, and you will receive the greatest gift yet." The baskets were placed down again, heavy with bread, meat, and fruit. The pale children ate quickly, their hunger endless, their glow brighter, and then the crystal flared brighter than the moon. Visions crashed into every mind, not like before. This time they felt real. They saw wounds closing in seconds, men rising from beds of sickness. Broken bones mended, lungs healed. The vision was clear, the gift was healing. The people gasped, falling to their knees. This was no curse, this was a miracle. The sheriff's wife, who had coughed blood for months, stepped forward, trembling. She touched the crystal, and her body shook. When she stood, her breath was clear, her chest strong, the sickness gone. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "It healed me." It truly healed me. Cheers broke out. Fear forgotten for a moment, the townsfolk cried with joy, hugging each other, praising the strangers. But the soldiers stood stiff, their faces pale. One of them whispered, "Don't you see? This is how it begins. They heal you. They win your trust. Then they own you." His words spread quickly, cutting joy with suspicion. The sheriff stared at the crystal, his heart torn. He had seen the truth in the visions before. Every gift carried a shadow, healing now, but what price later? He asked aloud, his voice steady. "What is the cost of this gift?" The tall figure bowed its head, the many-layered voice answering slowly, "The cost is small, human. Every life saved must carry weight. Your years will shorten, your time will burn faster. But your pain will vanish, your sickness will be no more." The crowd fell silent. The sheriff's wife gasped, clutching his hand. "Better a short life without pain," she whispered, "than a long one full of suffering." Others nodded, desperate to believe, but many stepped back, horror on their faces. A gift that stole years, that traded time for healing. Was it worth it? The soldiers shouted for the crystal to be destroyed. The scientists begged to take it to their labs, the townsfolk argued, voices rising higher than the whispers in the forest. And in that storm of fear and hope, Anna's small voice cut through. "They give what we ask, but they never say how much it costs. If we take too much, maybe we will lose everything." Her words made even the strangers pause, their glowing eyes fixed on the child. Then the voice came again, heavy as thunder. "The child sees truth. Every gift has price, every night brings choice. Feed us, and we will prepare you for the war of the stars. Refuse us, and you will face it alone." The crystal dimmed. The visions faded. The strangers turned back to the forest, their children following, their glow strong and steady. The whispers faded into the night, leaving silence heavy as stone. Grey Hill stood divided. Some cried with joy at the healing, willing to give years away for peace. Others cursed the gift, calling it poison in disguise. And the soldiers swore that humanity must fight, not feed. But the crystal pulsed again, a heartbeat that would not stop. And the words echoed in every ear, "Tomorrow night." The gift. The sheriff looked at Anna, who stood calm as ever, her eyes never leaving the crystal. "What do you see, child?" he asked softly. She whispered back, "I see a choice, but not just for us, for the whole world." And in that moment he knew Grey Hill was no longer just a town. It was the battlefield of tomorrow, a place where every gift had a price, and the price of night had only just begun. The seventh night came like a storm that no one could escape. Grey Hill was silent, heavy with fear and hope. The crystal pulsed in the square, brighter than ever, its blue glow washing the town in cold light. Every heart knew this was the last night, the final choice, the night of truth. The people gathered, standing close, faces pale, voices low. Some prayed, others sharpened blades, soldiers loaded their rifles. But even the strongest among them could not shake the feeling that the end of Grey Hill was near. Whether it came through fire or through stars, no one could say. Ben, The boy who had glowed since eating the fruit stood by his mother. His eyes were strange now, shimmering like the pale children of the forest. Anna stood near the sheriff, calm as always, her gaze locked on the crystal. The sheriff himself felt older, his years heavy, but his hand was steady on his shotgun. He knew tonight would decide not just Greyhill, but maybe all of Earth. The whispers began. Louder than any night before, they shook the ground, bent the lamps, rattled the fences. From the forest came the pale figures, their children stronger than ever, their eyes glowing steady. The tall leader raised its arms, and the many-layered voice rolled like thunder. Feed our children, human. And tonight we give the greatest gift, the gift of forever, the gift of the stars. The baskets were brought out again, overflowing with food, bread, meat, fruit, milk, all laid down before the glowing children. They ate in silence, though not with weakness now. They ate with purpose, like soldiers preparing for war. The townsfolk watched in fear, because the more the alien children ate, the more human they seemed. Their eyes glowed brighter, their bodies stronger, their steps steadier. When the last crumb was gone, the crystal flared. The square exploded with light, visions crashing into every mind. This time, not only destruction, not only healing. This time they saw doors, great shining gates opening to the stars, worlds beyond imagining, safe havens glowing with golden skies, cities untouched by war, oceans endless and pure. The vision whispered, "This is the gift. Leave your Earth, walk through the gate, and survive." The people fell to their knees, gasping, weeping. Some cried out with joy, begging for the gate to open. Others screamed in terror, refusing to leave the soil of their ancestors. The sheriff stared into the light, his jaw tight. He saw Earth in the vision too, cracked and burning, cities falling, skies black with fire, and he saw the gate standing tall, waiting for those who dared step through. The tall figure spoke again. "Our gift is escape, human. Feed us, and we will open the way, but once you step through, you cannot return. Choose now before the war of the stars finds you." The crowd broke, torn apart, half shouted for the gates, half shouted to fight and stay. The soldiers raised their guns, swearing they would never abandon Earth. The scientists begged to take the gift to save humanity. Voices rose higher, fear and anger mixing with hope. Greyhill was no longer one town. It was two nations standing in the same square. And then Anna stepped forward. Her small hand touched the crystal, her eyes glowing with its light. She turned to the sheriff, her voice clear and steady. "They do not promise safety. They promise choice. We can leave and live, or we can stay and fight. But if we take the gift, we must pay the price." The sheriff asked, "What price, child?" She looked at Ben, whose glowing eyes shone brighter than ever. "The price is ourselves. We will not be the same if we walk through." The crystal pulsed harder, the ground trembling. A great shape rose in the square, a doorway of light, tall as the church, wide as the fields. Beyond it lay the stars, shining, endless, calling. The people gasped, some reaching out, others stepping back. The gate hummed, alive, waiting. The tall figure lowered its head. "Our gift is given, human. Feed us no more. For tonight the choice is yours. Step through, and live among the stars. Stay and face the fire that comes." Silence filled the square, broken only by the hum of the gate. Mothers clutched children, men gripped weapons. Tears ran down every face. The sheriff stood tall, shotgun in hand, staring at the light. Anna whispered again, "It is not just Greyhill that decides tonight. Humanity decides." The gate shimmered, its stars waiting. The crystal pulsed one final time, and then grew still. The strangers bowed, their glowing children standing close. They turned and melted back into the forest, their whispers fading like wind. The gate remained bright, eternal, silent, and Greyhill stood frozen, on the edge of forever, with a choice that no one could escape. Step into the stars or stay and burn. The final nightfall had come, and the story of Greyhill was no longer just a story of one town. It was the story of humanity itself.